Echoes of Us by Cecilia L. Chianti, Chapter 8.
An unexpected guest.
7 days passed in a blink, and today was the day Dad was coming home. I couldn't contain my excitement. I kept checking the time, telling Mom every 5 minutes. He should be landing now. He's probably already in the car. He'll be here any moment. At school, I must have brought up my dad a dozen times during morning break. Robert listened patiently, smiling each time I gush about how much I'd missed him. "He's going to be so happy to see you," he said, resting his chin on his hand. "You talk about him with so much love." "I've always been close to my dad," I said softly. "He's calm, but he sees everything." Then, during lunch break, someone from a school office came to the classroom door and called out, "Robert, phone call in the office." He stood up, a little confused, and quickly left. When he returned, his eyes were shining, his whole face brighter than I'd seen all week. "My uncle's coming," he said, out of breath. "He'll be here tonight, and he's arriving with your dad." I blinked. "Wait, what?" He nodded, grinning. "Apparently, they met in Asval. Your dad convinced him to come visit me. He said it's been too long." The thought of Dad and Mr. Zachary traveling together, two kind, quiet men who loved their kids deeply in their own ways, made me smile too. That evening, I stood by the window, heart racing. Then I heard the car pull up. I ran to the door. There they were, Dad and Mr. Zachary, stepping out of the taxi side by side, bags in hand, smiles warm despite the long journey. Robert was already at the gate, standing tall, but there was something different in his eyes, a softness, almost a childlike excitement. Because for Robert, Mr. Zachary wasn't just an uncle. He was the only family he had left. A father, a guide, a protector. And tonight, their worlds and our worlds were beginning to come together in a way that felt quietly. Right. Instead of going to a hotel, Mr. Zachary stayed at our house. When he offered to find a room nearby, my parents wouldn't hear of it. Dad smiled and said, "You're family now. You'll stay with us." Mom had already prepared the guest room earlier that day. Fluff pillows, fresh bed sheets, and even some extra snacks on the side table. Mr. Zachary looked touched, slightly shy but grateful. "I don't want to trouble anyone," he said. "You're not," Mom replied warmly. "We're happy to have you here." That night, after a lovely dinner pork curry, steamed rice, and salad, we all sat together in the living room, sipping tea and sharing stories. Mr. Zachary laughed more than I'd ever seen him. He and Dad got along like old friends, and Adrian and Benjamin joined in the conversation like they'd known him for years. That night, Robert didn't join us for dinner. Even though his uncle was staying at our house, Robert had to follow hostel rules. Unless they had special permission, hostelers weren't allowed to leave campus after school hours. So he stayed back and ate in the hostel cafeteria, probably sitting with the same few friends he always did, quietly, maybe with his books beside him. Mr. Zachary didn't seem upset. He had already made plans for the next day. After sipping his tea, he turned to my parents and said, "Tomorrow, I'll be taking Robert out for the day." He explained that he had spoken to the principal earlier that afternoon and received full permission. "He needs some study supplies," Mr. Zachary said. "Books, pens, soap, shampoo, lotion, toothpaste, the basics, and maybe some extra notebooks for revision." My dad nodded approvingly. "That's good. It's important to make sure he's well prepared," Mr. Zachary added, with a quiet note of pride in his voice. "The principal said it was no problem. Robert's one of the top 3 in the class." I wasn't surprised. Robert always studied in silence, never showing off. But his grades, they spoke for themselves. If he hadn't been so strong academically, the school probably wouldn't have agreed to let him out during a school day. But because he was consistent, disciplined, and respectful, they trusted him. The plan was simple. After class, Mr. Zachary would pick him up. They'd spend the day buying everything Robert needed, not just for now, but for the months ahead. I imagined them walking to the market, stopping by a bookstore where Robert would carefully flip through textbooks, compare prices, and choose the cleanest, sharpest notebooks. Then maybe a stop at a local shop for essentials, soap, toothpaste, a fresh towel. The little things that meant a lot when you lived away from home. And even though it wasn't my outing, I found myself excited too. Just thinking about him being cared for, looked after. It warmed something deep inside me. He had someone. He wasn't alone. And I knew, even before tomorrow came, that Robert would return with more than just school supplies. He would return with that quiet reassurance that he mattered to someone who had always stood in for family, and maybe now he was slowly building one of his own. The next day, as soon as the last bell rang, Robert slipped away to the hostel to change into casual clothes. He knew Mr. Zachary was already waiting at the gate, standing calmly as always with his hand behind his back, dressed in a neatly pressed shirt and holding a list of things they needed to buy. To avoid any unnecessary delays or questions from hostel staff, Robert came back out neatly dressed and ready to go. Before they left, they invited me to tag along. Robert smiled and said, "You could come with us. It'll be fun." But I gently shook my head. "No, this is your time with him. You don't get many chances like this. If I come, I'll just get in the way." Robert gave me that soft look he always did when he understood what I meant. Even if I didn't say it all. "All right," he said, "but next time, you're coming." While they were gone, I stayed home and buried myself in homework. I revised history, finished my political science notes, and even wrote out a few English answers that might come in the next test. Once I was done, I helped Mom around the house, mopped the floors, washed the laundry, dusted the shelves. It felt nice to move around, to keep busy. Around 6:30 p.m., the front gate creaked open. Robert and Mr. Zachary had returned. Robert was carrying a paper bag filled with books and toiletries. He looked a little tired, but happy. Mom was just finishing up in the kitchen. The smell of fried chicken filled the house. She had cooked a full meal. Dry mushroom soup, fried chicken by a traditional miso dish made with mixed vegetables, salt, a bit of MSG, and baking soda for that soft, earthy texture. As soon as Robert sat down at the table, he let out a relaxed sigh. "This smells amazing," he said, and then quietly added, "I've missed home-cooked food so much." He didn't complain about hostile food, but his words said enough. "Every day it's the same menu," he said between bites. "Rice, dal, some overcooked vegetables. I've gotten used to it. But this is different." He ate a lot, more than I'd seen him eat before. Watching him enjoy the meal so wholeheartedly made me smile. It wasn't just about the food. It was about feeling like he belonged at the table, in the house, and slowly, in our lives. After staying in Shillong for 2 more days, Mr. Zachary prepared to leave for Izal. At breakfast, he said with a smile, "I'd love to stay longer, but if I go back too late, my boss will think I've run away." We all laughed, but we understood. Life was calling him back. That afternoon, Robert came to our house to see him off. He stood quietly near the gate, hands in his pockets, eyes lowered just a little. When the taxi drove away and turned the corner, I glanced at Robert, and I could see it in his face. That quiet sadness. The kind that only comes when someone important is leaving again. I walked up to him slowly. "Hey," I said softly, "they'll be fine. You still have us. And he'll be back before you know it." Robert nodded, not saying much. But I could tell my words reached him. What we didn't realize, though, was that my family was watching us from a porch. All of them. The way we stood close. The way I looked up at him. The way he looked at me, like no one else was there. Adrian raised an eyebrow and gave me a watch yourself signal with 2 fingers and a smirk. But I completely missed it. Robert left shortly after, politely greeting everyone before heading back to the hostel. During supper, it began. First, it was Adrian, who said loudly while passing rice, "So, I think I saw love in the air today." Benjamin chuckled and added, "Yeah, some serious eye contact going on." I immediately looked down at my plate, my heart racing. Then Dad leaned in with that teasing sparkle in his eye and said, "A little birdie told me there's a boyfriend hiding somewhere around here." "Dad." I cried, burying my face in my hands. The whole table burst into laughter. My cheeks were burning. My ears, too. My heart was pounding. I couldn't even look up. Mom just smiled quietly, pretending to focus on her soup, but I saw the little smile tugging at her lips. They all knew. They weren't angry. They weren't upset. Just curious, amused, and maybe deep down, supportive. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I let out a deep sigh. They all knew, but strangely, it didn't scare me anymore, because the people who mattered most, they were laughing, not judging, and my heart felt a little lighter.